My name is Rebecca Woods. I also go by the name Miosa. That's kind of become sort of my professional name that I use for a lot of stuff. I have an MFA, which is hilarious, from Newcastle University in Newcastle upon Tyne, specifically in installation and performance art. So a lot of the stuff that I make is made out of repurposed and recycled materials. I do a lot of dumpster diving. I do a lot of stuff like that. So sometimes what I do is very expensive and sometimes it's not. I can't predict how much something's going to cost. I feel like I am fighting tooth and nail to make what I do sustainable. I feel like every job I do at the moment, I feel like my day job teaching, and things that I managed to get here and there are just feeding my art space and feeding my art practice long enough for me to keep it alive. That's kind of what I feel like right now. And it doesn't help that I'm in a really isolated area where there's not a lot of support for that kind of thing. I went to grad school in the United Kingdom, and it was kind of my hope that I was going to make something much bigger and better for myself over there, I mean, not over here. But life doesn't work out like you always intend it to. So I've been out of grad school now for about 3 years. And it's like these past 3 years of my life have just felt like I'm learning how to be a person again. And I'm figuring out what my artwork is gonna look like now that nobody's telling me what to do. So I think the thing that I pride myself on as an artist is the fact that I experiment and I am ingenuous in the fact that I want to figure out every possible or unexpected way that something can be used. I feel like I'm kind of a mad scientist sometimes because I will be doing all these random things, and sometimes some of them will work out, and when they do, it's very exciting. I don't think that cleverness or being able to think of clever things is any substitute for being able to get your hands on something and actually making it happen. For a sculpture I did for a show recently, I got into a disagreement with somebody involved in the show about how the work was to be displayed and pedestals and things like that. So I decided that the best plan of action would be to go into an active demolition site in the middle of the night and steal about 10 cinder blocks from a demolished building. Just like grab some gloves, jump over a fence, and load them in a truck. And they were all earmarked for the landfill, so I think that I was doing them a favor. But still, I'm not sure how I would have explained that if I was caught. Probably shouldn't be telling you that. I just have this habit of picking up and adopting little found things that, you know, maybe it's a bead that fell on the ground. Maybe it's just something really unusual and it just caught my eye. And for years, I've been collecting just random little bits of curiosities in glass bottles and delicately labeling them on labels that are like that big. And some of them are very descriptive for what they are, like I have a coyote femur. I have the femur from a coyote. And some of them just, sometimes I'll give them facetious labels just to mess with people. Like I have some right now that are these little tiny dice that I found. And that bottle is it's labeled dice for gnomes with gambling addictions. for no other reason than the fact that I want somebody to pick it up and look at it and go, what? Just that moment really there would make me really happy. Because like for one moment, I got them to pay attention to something they didn't care about. I got them to look at something they didn't think was important. I made it important to them for a second. And I think that's one of the things that art does. I don't think that you have to make a painting for something to be considered art, although I do make paintings. I don't think that you have to work in something as permanent as cast metal, although I've worked with cast metal. It's this fact that if it doesn't make this line of communication with the person in the audience who is viewing this thing, partaking of this thing, experiencing this thing, if you don't make that connection and that communication, you might as well have not done it. Because the art I make isn't just for me. There's a part of it that has to do with me. But I'm a really, really strong believer in the fact that when you are done with a piece of art and you put that thing out into the public eye, you have relinquished ownership of it. I don't believe that the job of an artist is to be a dictator. People have all kinds of different experiences with my artwork, and I think that they're not just allowed to have that, I think that it's actually required. I think that you have to have your own experience of something in order for it to become something you own. That's something I feel really strongly about. I think that it's better for a piece of art to be good or bad. I think the worst thing that it can be is uninteresting, where it just becomes part of the background radiation of the stuff that you experience in your regular life and you just pass it by. I mean, there are so many things in the world that have been purposefully designed by people. Signs, city infrastructure, chairs, things that we use and we look and we hold every day, and we're so exposed to those things that we forget that human beings made them. It's like we have this thing in our head that just goes, oh, well, this thing's always been here. And it hasn't. Of course it hasn't. I think that electrical infrastructure is extremely interesting because it is mundane, because we don't think about it, because it's somehow one of the greatest revolutions in human history that now we can suddenly power everything with physics, and it travels along all these little lines that crisscross our entire country like arteries. And we just walk past and we're just like, oh, whatever. We don't even look up at them. Well, I have a number of projects that I've been thinking about and wanting to do. One of them specifically is a group project where I would select and invite artists as collaborators, and we would go out into the desert and set up a bunch of temporary structures and put together a temporary art exhibit. A lot of which would be around the idea of just temporariness, the idea that you don't have to build something that lasts forever. Ideally, I would like to make these cardboard geodesic domes built on a certain structure, and it's like each one of those would become its own little space for somebody to inhabit and to work in. And the biggest part of it for me, because I've had a fascination with like power lines and streetlights for a long time, it's like this invisible sort of infrastructure that people don't pay a huge amount of attention to, is just this mess of power poles, like the sort of imagery you get like in 2011, for example, when the tsunami hit the eastern coast of Japan. You would see this wreckage with just huge piles of power lines and poles. But something like that, with some of them still standing and lines strung between them, and for some reason the lights are still on. They shouldn't be, but they are. And that just being this wrecked infrastructure linking these places. So I think that it's a cliche for artists to say that art is their passion. But this is what I live and what I breathe. And The periods of time in my life in which I haven't been making art have literally been the worst times of my life. And to be able to just think about creating things, putting them in front of people, and creating experiences for people to have, not just for them to go and to look at it for, 3 to 60 seconds on a wall and then walk past it and go, whatever, good wine. To be able to make the stuff that I've wanted to make, temporary art exhibits, things that call upon the expertise of people who are not myself. To be able to put that in front of a new group of people. I honestly can't think of anything that would be more empowering to me, to struggle for what feels like a really long time, and then to be able to make, to exhibit, to display, to collaborate, and to bring it to places where people don't normally see art. Like a mobile studio. Why not take that out into the middle of nowhere? Could probably change somebody's life.